Welcome back. We're talking about the recently ratified peace deal between the Colombian government and FARC rebels. Let's get back to our panel. Michael, you mentioned a moment ago that there is opposition to the deal on the political side, much of it led by the former president Alvaro Uribe. Is there anything that the political opposition has in its arsenal that could undermine this deal?
Well, they have popular support. Effective implementation requires cooperation with local authorities, with communities, and to the extent that that Uribe promotes this resistance and opposition to this, it makes it more complicated. So I think that's the problem. But let me just say, there's going to be a second plebiscite on the peace deal. The first one was rejected on October 2nd. The second one will be the next presidential elections in 2018, because this is going to be the issue. And of course, Uribe can't run again, but Uribe will have his candidate who will represent an opposition to this agreement. And we're going to see the Colombian people have another opportunity to vote, because I think that's going to be the central issue.
So, Michael, that makes it really important for the government to show now that there is some peace dividend.
Absolutely. That I think is the strategy. Santos has until August of 2018 left. And I think what he wants to do is to show results quickly and to try to convince people that this agreement was a good one, that it's working for them, that there is attention to neglected areas of the country, that a lot of the FARC are being successfully reintegrated into society and participate in the economy. And then people will say, this may not have been a bad deal. You know, I was skeptical, but I've been convinced. And then the election result will be different. But if they're not, if it's not done well and they don't have the resources and the questions that Ana Maria raised are not resolved, then Uribe and his party and his candidate will be in a strong position in 2018.
I want to comment on what Michael said, and is about that this political division is really important for the course of this peace agreement, especially because we've been seeing here in Washington sometimes the former president Uribe doing lobby against the peace deal inside Congress. And then we saw almost 2 weeks ago President Santos coming to the Congress and talking with some of the members who are openly opposing to this deal, trying to convince them to approve this help from the U.S. government in a post-conflict scenario that is the Peace Colombia deal. And also we have to consider that the U.S. government is been supporting in a strong way this agreement. So I consider that this profound division with the political scenario behind, with the elections really close, it's one interesting fact in this process.
Good. Ana Maria, as Michael pointed out, the government would have to show results before the next election. So what are the sort of milestones or benchmarks in this process that we should be looking for in the months ahead?
Well, I think that we only have 2 years. It's going to be quite difficult, but basically the main challenges for them is to show that most of the members of the FARC are demobilizing, and they are starting to do some demonstrations with victims trying to requesting or asking for forgiveness and telling what they did throughout this process. And I think that emotional part is going to play an important role. I really don't think the government is going to be able to start implementing the hardcore agreements on rural development and on other issues that they agreed upon. So it's basically an emotional process in which the FARC is going to start demobilizing. They are going to start telling the truth about part of what they did, and the victims are going to play an important role throughout this process. But it's going to be challenging for Santos because the opposition is articulate, it has a strong popular support, and Uribe is really aiming for the 2018 election in which his candidate wins.
Michael, how difficult is it going to be for FARC to extricate itself from being a guerrilla group to becoming something more of a mainstream group in Colombia? For instance, it ran the cocaine trade in Colombia, made a lot of money out of that. There's one figure that says, or two figures rather, that says it made between $200 million and $3.5 billion a year, and that it's got $10 billion stashed away in foreign bank accounts. How difficult is that going to be?
It's going to be very difficult, and I think it's unrealistic to expect that all of the FARC will completely extricate itself from the drug trade. They've made this commitment. It's part of the peace deal. I think the leadership is behind it, but there's rank and file members of the FARC that are making a lot of money, that are doing well, and it's going to be very, very hard for them to leave it. I think we have to be realistic about what's going to happen. It's not that the whole FARC is going to sort of become demobilized, reintegrated. There's going to be a part of the FARC that is going to continue to be involved in illegal activity, whether the drug trade, illegal mining. There are other illicit activities in Colombia, and the temptations and the incentives are great. And so I think you should see this as a positive step. But it doesn't mean that it's going to end the illegal activity. The drug trade is a big problem. The drugs production is way up. That's partly because of the FARC and the agreement itself, which said that those people who cultivated coca would get special treatment and resources. And of course, that was an incentive for people to produce coca, because they would fall under this. They would be beneficiary of this peace deal. So this is a concern. President Santos is well aware of it. It's going to be a big issue here in the U.S. Congress in terms of support going forward. There's a lot of concern about the increase in coca production. It's gone to levels that it was many years ago, and returned to those high levels. And this is going to be a challenge both in Bogota as well as in Washington, the politics in Washington.
What do you think, Diana? As Michael says, it's going to be a big challenge. How difficult is it going to be for the government to tell the farmers, stop growing coca, grow bananas now?
Yeah, I totally agree with Michael, because the coca numbers are increasing. So now with this new administration under the next president of the United States, Trump, and his party also controlling the Congress, there's going to be a hard debate, especially for the debate for the budget, for this help that it's providing, that it's going to provide the U.S. government, and especially because most of those members of Congress that are opposing to this deal consider that they have to provide more proofs on the side of the government that they're respecting the human rights, the voices of the opposition, and that they're not continue with this illegal traffic of drugs in Colombia.
All right, but broadly speaking, do you expect that there will still be continued support even under the new administration for this peace deal?
Yeah, and I think that the main reason is that the Plan Colombia was a successful plan for United States. Our country was like a failed state, or some people call it failed state, 15 years ago, and it was a positive transition. And this process just is one example that we have a strong democracy, that we hear the voices of the opposition, and we want to move on. So I consider that the support from U.S. is going to continue, but I think the debate about the budget for this support, it's going to be a tough fight for the Colombian government, especially under this new administration with the next President Trump.
Ana Maria, this war lasted 52 years, killed hundreds of thousands of people, millions more were forced out of their homes, were displaced. What did this do to Colombia? How much damage did it cause?
The damage was immense, Anand. I'm an economist, so basically what I have done is to study the economic cost of conflict, and what we have found is that the economic cost of conflict are huge. The education levels are lower because of that. The health of the people deteriorated. We had about almost 7 million displaced people that lost 7.4 million of hectares of land. And this, of course, had a huge impact on agricultural production in the country. So the studies that we have done show that each year we are losing about 0.5 percentage points of agricultural GDP because of the conflict and because of all this process. I could give you much more figures, but the main message that I would like to send is that the costs have been immense, the economic cost. But also, if you look at the country, we have now today a country that is polarized, that has a large percentage of people, a large percentage of the population facing post-traumatic stress and a large number of victims, and it's going to be a difficult path ahead. Even if the peace agreement is successfully implemented, we still need decades to recover from this process.
Michael, on the question of how Colombia moves on from here, things like foreign investment, your organization, the Inter-American Dialogue, provided us with some figures. China, the other big player in Latin America, granted Colombia a $75 million loan in 2014. Now, that's relatively small compared to the investments that China has been making in Venezuela or in Brazil. Is that likely to change now with this deal?
Well, we'll see what the conditions are. I think there's going to be a wait-and-see attitude to see if how this moves forward. There was just a meeting in Cartagena, Colombia, recently with major CEOs of multinational companies to try to promote and motivate investment in Colombia. I think there's interest. I think people see enormous promise. But this right now, we have a deal that's been agreed to. But the country still has enormous problems. And I think to the extent that we could begin to see at least something begin to happen in terms of implementation, that will encourage. The Chinese haven't really been as involved in Colombia. Like you said, that's a relatively small, minor figure. If you look at a lot of other Latin American countries, China is not a big factor in Colombia compared to other countries. But I do think in terms of U.S. investment and other investors, there's going to be a lot of interest. They're going to be following very closely how this unfolds and whether this deal is actually put in practice.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.